Let's bring in our special guest this evening. Mohammad Chowdhury of PWC, Executive Director for India, is joining us on the show. Hi, Mohammad. Thanks very much for being with us on the show. First off, 2 new slots for 2G auction. How does that help the sector?
If there are new slots made available for the sector, it definitely helps. The Indian telecom sector is very much spectrum starved. The average amount of spectrum that an operator has in India is 10 megahertz, whereas if you compare it to countries elsewhere, in France it's 125 megahertz, in the US it's over 50 megahertz, and in most countries it's well over those figures. In other countries, what we see is that as the amount of demand for spectrum rises, as data traffic goes up and voice traffic continues to go up, that the governments are making 50, 60, even 70% of the current amount of spectrum available, additional amount to that level being made available for the industry. So I think that if there are moves to make more spectrum available in India, that in itself is something to be welcomed.
Just heard the Telecom Secretary make it very clear that the government is going to go ahead with the controversial proposal on reallocation of spectrum, or refarming as the industry calls it. How much of a setback is going to be? You've done a lot of analysis on the impact of this as well. What's your sense? How much of a blow is this going to be for telecom companies?
Well, even before we consider the potential impact of refarming, the first thing to consider is actually the likely impacts of the spectrum auctions and the pricing that has been put forward in terms of the recommendations from the regulatory authorities. And even that alone, where the regulatory authorities have said that they feel that the cost impact per minute to a consumer will be 4.4 paisa, after assessment of those calculations, taking into account the factors that should perhaps be considered for that calculation, we've found that the impact is more likely 34 paisa in terms of cost per minute, which would translate in a metro to something like 90 paisa per minute cost increase. So given that the financial distress that the sector is under already is pretty significant, we are really thinking that if such pricing recommendations are taken forward, the industry will be left with no real option other than to look at being forced into putting tariff increases into place to account for these cost increases.
All right. No decision taken on reserve price. What's the best case scenario? We know what's the worst case scenario, and that I guess is going to be the TRI recommendations. But from here on, what is the best case scenario? On Saturday, the Telecom Commission will take a call. What is it that the industry you think will welcome?
I think in line with the best way in which to get results from auctioning scarce resources such as spectrum, the best scenario that could be adopted would be to adopt a bottom price that is at a level such that the players who participate in the auctions can determine through the forces of demand and competitive bidding pressure the right outcome in terms of the final prices that are paid. So really, starting with a much lower level of reserve pricing would be the best scenario. And I say that's the best scenario because, in our opinion, having looked at all of the different factors, the real challenge here is for the government to balance, firstly, the needs of the Indian mobile consumer, secondly, the needs of the government in terms of achieving its policy objectives to roll out telecoms to as many Indian people as possible with as high quality as possible. So those are the really key challenges. We've had 1 decade of good growth in Indian telecoms. What we don't want to do now is snatch.
We need a comeback story for the telecom sector today. Thanks very much, Mohammad. So nice of you to come at this hour. Thanks very much for joining us.